As a keyboard player, the voicings you'll naturally gravitate toward aren't always what a real guitarist would play. So let's take C major for example. While this voicing might sound great on piano, a real guitarist is just not going to play a C major chord this way. For example, if you look at the fretboard display on the interface, the E and G are both getting played on the high E string, which is physically impossible on a real guitar. So a guitarist is just not going to be able to play a C major chord that way. So how do you get realistic sounding guitar voicings? The key is to know the pitches of the guitar's open strings on the keyboard as the starting point. The open strings are E, A, D, G, B, E. And if you look at the interface on a fretboard, that fretboard display, you'll see all of those are getting played in the open, on the open strings. So guitarists use different mnemonics to remember the pitches of the open strings. For example, there's elephants and dogs got big ears, or one of my favorites, Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Post in the comments if you have any others that are favorite. So start by just memorizing those notes, and then you can derive real guitar voicings based on those by moving them sequentially up half steps. Let me show you what I mean, because I think it's a lot easier than the way it just sounded. So let's figure out how to play an E major chord. I'm going to start here. It's with an E, and so we can keep that note because that's part of the E major chord. We've got an A. I'm going to move that up by half steps until I get to the next chord tone, which is a B. And then there's the D, and I'll move that up by half steps up to an E. And then we've got a G natural, which will move up to a G sharp. And the rest of the notes we can keep the same. So there's your open position E major chord. And if you have any experience playing guitar, you'll recognize this voicing from the fretboard display as maybe even the first voicing you learned on guitar. That open E cowboy chord is what they call them. Okay, let's try an A major chord. So I'm going to go back to all the open strings. I can keep the E and the A. I'll move the D up to an E, move the G natural up to an A, and then the B I'll move up to a C sharp. And altogether it sounds like this. So that's your A major voicing. And as you might notice, it sounds a little bit muddy in the low range. And the way to fix that is just by leaving out the low E. So guitarists are conscious about that and will sometimes, when playing these open, these cowboy chords, they'll choose to not play that lowest string. They'll keep it muted or not strum it, or, depending on the chord, they'll even reach their thumb around the fretboard and mute it with the side of their thumb. So here's your A major cowboy chord. Okay, let's go to D major. Okay, so we'll go back to the open strings. Okay, we've got an E, and I'll move it up to an F sharp. I can keep the A the same, keep the D the same, move the G up to an A, and then the B will get moved all the way up to a D, and the E will get moved up to an F sharp. And the way to check these is just to look at the fretboard display right here, and you can see that there's only one note happening on each string. So that's always a good sign that you've got a real playable voicing. Again, it sounds a little bit muddy in the low range, in the low register, so I'll remove that F sharp, and I might even just remove the A as well. So you just have those top four notes. If your chord is intentionally in the first inversion, you can leave that F sharp in the bass. Okay, let's go to a more difficult chord, like G major, for example. And these are all open position chords. So I'll go back to the open strings. And open position just means basically you're playing right here, right by the nut of the guitar. This is the nut of the guitar on the fretboard, and you're playing just right in this area right here. You're not moving your fretting hand way up the fretboard or anything like that. So back to the open strings, and remember we're going for a G major chord. So I'm going to move the E up to a G, and the A will move up to a B. The D we can keep, G we can keep, the B we can keep, and the E here we can move up to a G. So here's our voicing. So one thing that I should mention is some guitarists will move this open B, they'll move that up to a D. Okay, so you've got two different variations of that chord. You have this one and that one. And from there, let's maybe just do one more. Let's do a C major. So I'm back at the open strings. I'll keep the E, move the A up to a C, move the D up to an E, keep the G, move the B here up to a C, and we'll keep the open E right there. As before, I can maybe leave the E out and just play it like that. That's good too. Or some guitarists will move this E up to a G and play it right there on the 3rd fret. So this is good voicing, especially if you're going to a G major, you know, what was it, like that? Yeah. Because we can keep the G right there, right? So. And then that way that G is not moving at all when we switch between chords. So a lot of times you'll find that you know, things like minor chords are just a slight variation of the major version. So like that E major chord, we would just keep the open G right there. And then there's our E minor chord voicing. Same with A major, right? So instead of moving, you know, the B string, you know, up to the C sharp, we would just leave it on the C natural. And then there's our A minor chord. So what's important is not only to practice how to derive those different real guitar voicings, you know, how I showed you, you know, with the, starting with the open strings. And then that way, if you're suddenly like, oh, I need a B7 chord, how do I get that? You can figure that out pretty quickly. But also, just to get those chord voicings as muscle memory, and then that way you don't have to derive them every single time. Your E major chord should just come automatically. I'd say definitely E minor, E major, you know, A minor, A major, you know, probably the D major chord that we did. Those are very commonly used, especially when you get into bar chords, which is where you use your index finger across all the strings to basically work almost like a capo. And so it's the same chord shape, it's just moved up the fretboard. So knowing that, you know, back to those common chord voicings, having, you know, chords like the E major chord just memorized is going to be really, really helpful in the future. Okay, so I know this is a long video. Hopefully it was helpful, and I think just by getting real guitar voicings, getting those under your fingers, is going to lead to more realistic guitar strumming, more realistic arpeggios. It's going to sound a lot better than playing keyboard chords and thinking, you know, why isn't this sounding realistic, you know? You know, because you're not playing chords that a real guitarist would play. Hope this was helpful. Stay tuned for more videos.